Nayantara, I'm proceeding from the assumption that politics and culture are inextricably linked and that you can't have one without the other. And I'm also proceeding from the understanding that Nehru, the man, was as culturally aware and prescient as he was politically engaged. How do you see his relevance today for both politics and culture?
Well, I think you're quite correct when you say that politics and culture are intricately connected, and that Nehru was immersed in both. The culture of India, as he saw it, dating that is from the time of the national movement, was a secular culture, because the Congress party under Mahatma Gandhi had, it was really the first political formation that was countrywide, and therefore it included Indians of all regions, caste, class, mass, gender, language, everything. And a secular culture quite naturally emerged out of that formation, which then became the secular culture of modern India, and has remained so until today. Now, what will become of it now is in question, because in the eyes of the new government, secularism means apparently something quite different from what it meant before, and secondly, that they are trying to promote what they call a Hindu republic, which
So
in
do you
fact
think
is not
that
Hindu, it is what has come to be known as Hindutva.
what you thought Nehru's relevance is today, in today's cultural and political climate? Because following on from what you said, obviously today's government or today's politics has a very different notion of culture. So in this context, what do you feel is the relevance of Nehru's version of a secular culture and India's understanding of a secular culture?
Well, in this particular situation, I think the relevance of Nehru is more important than ever, because we need to remind ourselves of his legacy, and in fact which became the legacy of India, and the idea of India as a multicultural nation of many religions, all of which had equal status in India, and were allowed to live and worship as they pleased, as first-class citizens.
You think that's under threat now?
And it's not under threat, it's under attack and assault. The threat stage is long past. We are under assault, and this is coming out every day in the actions which the government is now taking, because all our premier institutions are now being staffed by servants of the RSS, who are not qualified people in their own right, and the qualified historians, scientists, etc. are being or have been removed. Not only the institutions, but writers, artists, filmmakers are all under attack. So we are in what I call a situation of Indian fascism, the Indian version of fascism, which is trying to regiment thinking. They are bringing down an iron curtain on the freedom of thought, because once they have that under control, the rest is easy.
You referred yesterday to something that you called the bomb in the basement. Would you like to expand
now
on that?
you see, when governments change, as they should change in a democracy, it's a good thing when they do, policies would change. And those also should change, because every situation needs perhaps another kind of approach to it, another policy. All of that is important and acceptable. What is not acceptable is that the foundations of India be then uprooted. That's what I call the bomb in the basement. That the whole structure be collapsed to build an entirely new structure. And that is why I quoted David Cameron as an example. Were he to stand up in the British Parliament and say Britain from today on is a Roman Catholic country, it would be as absurd as the government saying that we are now a Hindu country.
A lot of people have commented that we seem to be living through a period of an undeclared emergency. Is that something that you would agree with, since you lived through the real thing and were under threat, you personally?
I would call it an emergency, and certainly not undeclared. We are under an emergency. I would also call it, give it a stronger word than an emergency. We are, our most prized institutions are under brutal assault. It's not just an emergency. We are in an ominous situation.
What do you think should then be the role, or perhaps even the responsibility, of writers, of public intellectuals, of thinkers, of people who are, of course, alarmed by this, but also besieged by this? What then, as a writer, should one's response be?
My personal approach is to speak out, and I would like all writers, all artists who have been assaulted in this way or not been assaulted, to speak out for the others who have been, because a dictatorship counts on the silence of those who disagree. They don't allow dissent.
But do you see
But those writers who have been attacked already, like Murugan in the south, whose life has been threatened, whose families have been threatened, they cannot speak out for themselves, and therefore the rest of us must speak.
But do you see a kind of solidarity within the community? Because there seems to be a sort of self-censorship that goes along with the protest. Is this something that you find among writers, among intellectuals, artists, filmmakers? There are those who say we are not political, which is why I think the question of culture and politics becomes critical.
Well, surely that is the reason why there is such a thing as the Indian Writers' Forum.
Yes.
Where writers have joined it, signed up, because they are determined to speak out.
So let me go back to this question of what is happening in our political cultural context today. The RSS, which is what I think you mean by the bomb in the basement, has always said it's a cultural organization. And yet we see that it is politically calling the shots at the moment, or it seems at any rate to be the not so hidden hand behind the changes that you mentioned. How would you then see this evolving? Will the RSS continue to play this role of actually being the sort of backroom boys of the BJP, or do you think that the country or the electorate or people at large will begin to twig what's happening?
The RSS are the front room boys, not the backroom boys. The RSS and the government, the BJP government, are the same. The RSS has been political since the 1920s in such organizations as the Hindu Mahasabha and other right-wing Hindu organizations. And there was something quite absurd about them describing themselves as purely cultural. Certainly they want to promote what they consider Hindu culture, but which is not Hindu culture. I, as a Hindu and a believer, am appalled at what Hindutva has done to Hinduism.
Yes.
And what we have to remember to call them is Hindutva. They are not Hindus.
That's true.
It's another category of people altogether.
Yes.
With a very obvious political interest in changing the ideology and complexion of this country.
Changing the idea of India is perhaps what one
Changing
could
the
say.
idea of India, changing what they think of as the culture of India, bringing forth what a new culture, as they call it, which will be Indian, but which is not Indian because India has not been Hindutva.
You know, as writers, as creative people, and of course, probably in principle as well, one is generally against bans. One is against the banning of any product, any idea, any sort of stream of thinking. So, do you think the RSS should have been banned when it was, as being inimical to the politics of the country?
You know, for 60 years, the RSS has been banned by the Indian public. They have not voted it in, you know.
Well, they were never a party, so they couldn't be voted in.
Well, this is how we conceive banning in a democracy. Don't bring those people to power. And that is what Indians have done all along. In a new situation now, that hasn't happened.
No, but the point I was trying to make is that when they were banned, there was a particular political sort of impulse for it. It was post the assassination of Gandhi. There was a very close link between that violence and yes. So we are speaking from a very different vantage point. A lot of people believe that banning the RSS and sending them underground actually enabled them to continue what they call their cultural work and in fact go into homes in the way that very few other parties were doing.
No, the RSS was banned for a very short period, very short period, and then let out of jail. The point about going into people's homes and working in a subterranean way, they have been doing all along.
Yes.
Every fascist organization has done it. That is their technique. They are highly organized, highly disciplined, and this is the way they act. So nobody has prevented them from doing that kind of subterranean propaganda.
Well, you can't actually prevent anyone from doing.
Nobody bothered to, because we are a democratic country. We can only ban through the vote, and that is what has happened all these years. That period when they were banned was very short, and following the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi.
You know, there's something very curious that has happened, I think, with Nehru lately, which is that, of course, he's come in for a lot of hindsight criticism. That is, you know, 50 years later you criticize a guy, okay, you're doing it with the benefit of hindsight. So people like Perry Anderson and others have had a great deal to say about not very complimentary things about him. And on the other hand, you have quasi-political cultural organizations like Sehmat claiming Nehru. The left, which actually disclaimed him not so long back, is now claiming him because they see the current regime as being far more dangerous than, let's say, a Nehru who they thought
Was their enemy at that
was too much of a bourgeois.
That's right.
What do you make of that?
Well, I have to say that it's very strange to see the present government suddenly making a hero out of Sardar Patel, for instance, and owning him, as it were, and Ambedkar, you know, people whom in their dreams had never figured. I congratulate the BJP. My feeling is better late than never. You know, one of these days they might start recognizing Nehru.
But you don't think it's just an attempt to legitimize themselves?
Of course it is. It's so funny. It's what makes them so comic.
But then they should be embracing Nehru with the...
Well, I say maybe in time, it's taken them all these years, 60 odd years, to recognize Sardar Patel. So, I mean, maybe another 60 years, they'll see that Nehru had a contribution.
Will you make of it?
I just think the whole thing is absurd. Yes. And these are all such see-through techniques. as you say,
On all
it is
sides.
exposing them with every move they make, and therefore even the communists.
So, would you say that this was a very opportunist kind of appropriation, or do you?
Well,
when you
entirely, but even that is putting it too politely. You know, it's a part of a very highly thought out, developed program on the part of the Hindutva right wing. Yes, and they are proceeding step by step to dismantle Nehru. I mean, we see it in obvious cases like the foreign minister going to Bandung for the celebration of the 60th anniversary, I think, of the Bandung conference and non-alignment, and not even mentioning Nehru's name in her speech. It's like talking about the Ramayana and leaving out Ram. You know, it's absurd. It is part of their plan. It's not happening in a haphazard way.
So let's then assume that they are doing it because they understand that Nehru's relevance continues.
They are doing it because they have a psychopathic fear of Nehru.
Would you say then that this systematic dismantling, as you call it, is an indication of their anxiety about Nehru, that they think he's still relevant?
He's the only figure that they're finding it hard to dismantle. They have such a psychopathic fear of the place he occupies in India.
And in Indian culture and politics.
And in Indian culture and politics. And his contribution to India is so unquestionable that they are having to dismantle him in this way by leaving him out of each contribution that he made. Yes, off the record. Rewriting history and leaving out Nehru, like telling the story of the Ramayana and leaving out Ram.
Thank you very much, Nayantara. Thank you for being part of this program today.